Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here, welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to be going over some new Battlefield 6 leaks, as a lot of new information, both through leaking from the Battlefield Labs tests that are going on this weekend, but also through data mining, have come to light. And some of them, especially around the class system, are, to me at least, particularly concerning. So let's just jump straight in here. As always, if you guys enjoy the content here on the channel, I would urge you to subscribe. There's going to be a lot more to come on Battlefield 6 in the future, and if you want to stay up to date with everything, this is going to be one of the best places to do so. So in a recent blog post from DICE themselves, they detailed how they were not going to lock weapons to classes, and their main rationale behind this is that they don't want to shoehorn you into playing a certain class just to gain access to that weapon. And in their minds, I think in past games like Battlefield 4, they think that everybody picked the assault class because they wanted to use the assault rifle. I actually don't believe that. I think everybody picked the assault class because it had the holy trifecta. They had the heals, they had the revives, and they had the assault rifles, which is a really good weapon class. And so in Battlefield 6, they are experimenting at least with leaving it completely open. However, in order to encourage you to use each class's said weapon, they have introduced what they call class signature weapons and traits. And Temporal has now data mined exactly what all of these are. Some of them are extremely overpowered. I'm going to get into exactly why. Some of them kind of like a nothing burger of a signature weapon, so let's just take a look at them. So first of all, we have the assault class. So the signature weapon here is of course the assault rifle, and the perk is faster switching to and from assault rifles. Now, we're going to get into that in a minute, why that is so important. I know from the offset, it doesn't really sound that great. And then the signature trait here, and just to make this clear, the signature trait of the class is not tied to the weapon, so you don't need to use an assault rifle to unlock the signature trait. This is just a trait that the class gets, no matter what weapon you're using. And it's enhanced mobility, reduced fall damage, no movement speed penalty resulting from a fall, and faster sprint to shoot transition with all weapons. So the last part there, faster sprint to shoot, is actually pretty powerful there for the assault class. Now let's come back to the faster switching to and from the assault rifles. Normally, in most games, you would assume that your secondary is going to be a pistol. And if that were the case, this wouldn't really be that powerful of a perk. You don't really find yourself switching to your pistol all too often unless you're in an extremely dire situation, and even then the pistol is not the best weapon that you want to reach for. However, in Battlefield 6, some of you who've been paying attention to the leaks may have seen footage of assault players using two assault rifles, one as their primary and one as their secondary, kind of like how you do in a battle royale. Now, I had always assumed that this was a bug, maybe just something that DICE were testing out and it wasn't going to make it into the game, but Temporal has actually confirmed this, and he says dual primary weapons in Battlefield 6 aren't a bug, they are a feature called Weapon Sling, available in the frontline path of the assault class. So similar to field upgrades from past games, you can choose one of the two paths, and for the assault class, if you choose the frontline path, you can equip two assault rifles. You can also have a gadget, and you have a stim. And so now you can see why switching both to and from assault rifles as a signature weapon perk is a lot more effective if you're carrying two assault rifles. I mean, just think of the possibilities of this, right? Normally, the limiting factor, if you have a weapon with, let's say, an extended 45 round magazine, you can maybe spray down 3 people, and then you've got to duck behind cover, and that gives the defending enemy a grace period with which to lick their wounds or maybe rush you and try to kill you. However, if you can just switch to another assault rifle and you've got another 45 rounds, that completely goes out of the window. What if you decide to take a shotgun as your secondary, right? You know, somebody takes out an assault rifle, they duck behind cover to reload, you try to rush them, and then all of a sudden they've just got a shotgun. Like, the readability there, again, just totally goes out of the window. And if DICE's idea with not locking weapons to classes is to not shoehorn people into using the best class in the game, well, in my opinion, they've just failed catastrophically. If you're going to give me an assault class that can have 2 primaries when the other 3 classes can't, and you've got a self-heal and you've got grenade launchers, everybody is going to be playing the assault class. I'm sorry, that's just how it's going to turn out. And in my opinion, if they don't revert this change or make some serious changes to it, the assault class is going to be completely and totally broken. Now let's take a look at some of the other classes here in comparison. So for the support class, we of course have the signature weapon as light machine guns. They're experienced with heavy gear and they don't suffer sprint speed penalty with light machine guns. Okay, that's actually pretty decent. You know, being able to sprint at regular speed with a light machine gun as opposed to the other classes is quite nice, but it's nowhere near as good as what the assault class get. And then their signature trait is actually faster revive and drag speed, so faster at dragging down soldiers and faster at reviving them when stationary. That is a really, really nice trait to have there. It kind of reminds me of Falk from Battlefield 2042. She's able to revive people so much faster than the other medics, and for me at least, that's why I generally like to pick her. Now, I'm going to skip over the engineer class for a minute, and you'll understand why I come to them last. So let's go and take a look at the Recon class. Their signature weapon is of course, the sniper rifle, and it says expert marksman who can stabilize aim by holding breath and can rechamber quicker between shots. So stabilizing your aim by holding your breath, I don't think that's really that powerful. In fact, it almost feels like a bit of a nothing burger of a trait. But being able to rechamber shots quicker is actually huge. Now, I've seen people reacting to this on Reddit and they don't really seem to be very impressed, but being able to rechamber your shots quicker between rounds is actually pretty massive. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. First of all, if you're sniping an enemy player and they don't happen to be playing as Recon, what happens generally in a sniper standoff is you both take a pot shot at each other, then you duck behind cover to rechamber a round, and if you're going to be able to rechamber it faster and ADS quicker, then as soon as the other guy pops his head out, then you're probably going to get that shot off first and get the kill. Furthermore, it's been confirmed from leaks that one-shot kill in the chest is now back for this Battlefield game. So this was in Battlefield 2042 at the start. I kind of like this because you could play an aggressive role with like a red dot sight with a one-time zoom on a sniper rifle. You could run around one-shotting people in the chest, but on the flip side, if you missed your shot and you had to rechamber your next round, you were probably going to die. Well, now this perk may make that sort of playstyle much more effective. And then for the signature trait here, they have aim spotting. Automatically spots enemies while aiming down sights. This is, in my opinion, incredibly powerful. Again, a lot of people don't seem impressed because they say, well, can't you just press Q whenever you aim down sights anyway, therefore spotting the person? And yeah, I guess technically you can, but generally in Battlefield games, the spotting mechanic has had some sort of a cooldown. So, you know, having to constantly spam Q isn't that great if you're trying to ADS in and out of cover and actually play tactically. So actually, I think automatic spotting is particularly powerful. So now let's take a look at the engineer class. Now you're not going to be too impressed here from the offset. The signature weapon here is the personal defense weapon, the PDW or the SMG, and you get improved hipfire control when using a PDW. Now that, in my opinion, is not too great because whilst it's useful, a lot of the time I use PDWs, I'm still aiming down sights anyway. So, you know, in all of those situations where you are actually ADSing, that's not going to benefit you at all. And then for the signature trait here, they have explosive damage resistance, take reduced damage from explosives. This perk has been, I think, in some form or another in every single Battlefield game, and really for me, I've never really found it particularly useful. So why did I come to the engineer class last of all? Well, again, looking from the leaks of the game that have been all over Reddit recently and from past tests, I have seen people running around as the engineer with not one, but two launchers. And again, just like with the assault class, I thought this has got to be a bug, this has got to be unintended, but now I'm thinking, since this has been somewhat confirmed by Temporal to be a part of the game design for the assault class, maybe the same thing is true for the engineers. So, to be clear here, unlike in past Battlefield games where normally you could equip one gadget as a launcher, and then you could have, you know, C4, mines, something along those lines, right? Not another launcher. In this game, you can just go and take two launchers, and it can be two launchers of the same variety. You don't need to take an anti-air launcher and then an RPG as anti-ground. You can take like a javelin and an RPG, or you could take like an RPG and the SMOR, or an RPG and the Carl Gustav, like the M5 recoilless type weapon from Battlefield 2042. And this has so many implications, I don't even know where to begin. So first of all, imagine you're playing in a tank. A lot of the readability of these interactions between the engineer and the tanker is that the engineer has a single launcher. He fires his shot, he goes behind cover, and now he's reloading. And you, again, have that grace period where you can react. Maybe you back behind cover, maybe you lick your wounds and repair, maybe you push the guy and try and kill him before he can get off his next shot. If he can now have a second launcher and just instantly switch to it and fire that second shot, that readability just completely goes out of the window. Furthermore, the whole choice between do I want to play an anti-ground role and take an RPG, or do I want to be an anti-air engineer, that goes out the window as well, because now you can just take a Stinger and an RPG and cover anti-air and anti-ground at the same time, which to me just sounds completely broken. And I mean, we don't really have any air vehicles in the game at the moment. We haven't really seen, you know, much testing of that, so it's difficult to say what the implications would be, but I can only imagine that being in any vehicle in this game is impossible. So I really don't know what they're thinking. The blog post they put out the other day was actually called The Class System Part 1, so perhaps in Part 2 they're going to go over some of these traits and further explain their thought process behind this, but I, for one, if their whole goal, the whole rhetoric for the class system here is to not force you to use a certain class in order to gain access to a certain weapon, then by giving Assault class 2 assault rifles or 2 primaries, they have just failed catastrophically. Everybody's going to play Assault all the time, and then whenever they need to take out a vehicle, they're going to switch to Engineer, and the Engineers are going to be ridiculously overpowered at doing it because they've got 2 launchers. Also, what is the point of having mines in the game? Why would you ever take a mine or C4 where you have to get up close to the vehicle to plant the C4 when you can just have 2 launchers and do it from a distance? The whole reason that C4 and mines are worth taking is precisely because you can't take 2 launchers, right? It's the weaker of the 2 gadget choices. So all of those gadgets just kind of fall by the wayside, in my opinion. Obviously, you can tell I'm pretty flabbergasted by this. I just don't understand it at all. I'm definitely all for testing things out. You know, Battlefield Labs at the moment is in a testing environment. If you look over on Reddit, you'll see a lot of people commenting who have tried the build this weekend, saying, you know, oh my god, like the textures aren't finished on some of the weapons, some of them are placeholder. And I think the whole pre-alpha designation for games and you know what beta means, what open beta means, yada yada yada, has become blurred, and this is basically game developers to blame a lot of the time, because they release a build for the game and call it an alpha test, but in actuality the game is pretty much finished and they're marketing the game. Same is true for the beta tests, of course, but in this situation, this is well and truly a pre-alpha, and that's the reason that DICE are calling it pre-alpha. It's literally like the earliest designation they can really give the game in order to convey the fact that it is wholly unfinished. You are going to see a lot of bugs, you are going to see a lot of visual errors and placeholder textures and things like that. And so I am aware this is also a testing environment when it comes to the gameplay and the balance, and maybe this is just that. Maybe they're just testing it out and they want to see how people react to it. And well, that's my reaction. I would love to hear yours down below in the comments, guys. Let me know what you think about this. As always, leave a like if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe to stay up to date with everything Battlefield, and I'll see you guys in the next one.